Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, today we will be talking about the Zakat of Business. Many people, especially during the month of Ramadan and prior to that, call me and ask, how is the Zakat of Business calculated? How is it assessed? So I thought about doing this video, which might go into multiple videos explaining so that people have a reference how to calculate the zakat of their business. So when we say business and calculating the zakat of business, where do we start? What is the starting point? The starting point in assessing the zakat of business is understanding the constitution of your business, because in modern times we have multiple constitutions of business. We have sole proprietorship, we have general partnership, we have limited liability partnership, and we have companies, private companies, public companies, and in the US parlance they are called corporations. Why is that important from a zakat perspective? Because ownership is very important from a zakat perspective. Ownership is the starting point where zakat is calculated, assessed, or whether we determine whether zakat is applicable or not. So let us start from understanding the basics of the concept of ownership in Sharia, in Islamic jurisprudence, so that we have a clear understanding of where to start from when we are talking about zakat of business. So let us say what Allah says in the Quran, the basic ruling of zakat that is given in the Quran. Allah says, خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا. Take from their wealth a charity, that is the compulsory charity, which essentially refers to zakat, which will purify them, تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا, and which will cause a growth in their wealth in this world and in the hereafter. So three things become very important from an ownership point of view. One is a tasarruf, that is who controls the wealth. This milk basic ownership has got these implications that milk in Islam, ownership in Islam essentially assumes that a person who is owning a particular wealth has got control over that, and also al-laman wal istihqaq, that is he has got the risk of ownership. What is the risk of ownership? If a property is perished, or it becomes obsolete, or it stops to produce any benefit, the person who is affected is the owner. So laman is something that is closely tied to ownership as far as Islamic Sharia is concerned. Istihqaq refers to the right of disposal, that is a person who is owning something has got the absolute right of disposal, and all these combined forms the concept of milk or ownership in Islam. So the first point that we should assess is, where does ownership rest as far as zakat is concerned? And in business, when we are doing it in a modern parlance, as we have different forms of business composition, we should understand how much, what type of ownership that particular constitution offers. Now, this is expressed in a legal maxim, that is qa'idatun fiqhiyatun, that is a legal maxim or a fiqh maxim, or you can say Islamic jurisprudential maxim, la zakata illa fi malin mamlukin. There is no zakat except on wealth that is owned. So a wealth which can be attributed to a particular entity, a person, a Muslim. That is the form of wealth that is taxed from a zakat point of view. So this becomes a very basic maxim on which we will work forward, and this should be the starting point. That is why understanding business constitutions become very important from a zakat point of view. Now, what are the different types of business constitutions that we see today? So there can be different qualifications and different subtypes, but we can say that there are basically three types of business constitutions. One is proprietorship. What is proprietorship? A person starts a business and he owns that business. The capital comes from his personal capital. There is no other person who has joined his capital to this particular capital in business. So he is the sole owner of that particular business. Its assets and its liabilities will be attributed personally to him. And also, one very important thing in case of proprietorship is that there is no separation of personal wealth and business wealth of that person. That is, when he is calculating zakat, a person who is owning a sole proprietorship is calculating zakat, he cannot separate this particular business assets from his other personal assets. Everything will have to be combined together. One that falling in the same group will have to be combined together, and total zakat has to be calculated on that particular value. So that is one business constitution. The second would be partnerships. Simply, shirka partnership refers to those business constitutions where two or more people bring together their wealth or capital to form a particular business activity. So whatever is there in that particular pool or shirka or partnership becomes the joint property of the people who have contributed capital to. There is no separation of item wise separation of things like this table belongs to me, that chair belongs to him, this machinery belongs to the third person. No. Now when you bring everything into a partnership, that becomes a joint pool, and the ownership is in proportion to contribution of value to that entire pool of capital. So there will be a difference in treatment of zakat in that perspective. Now, a modern development in this regard are companies or corporations where the concept of limited liability comes in. What do we mean by limited liability? Limited liability is nothing but the company is deemed to be a separate entity, it is deemed to be a separate individual in the eyes of law, and the assets and liabilities of that particular company has got a distinct existence apart from the assets and liabilities of those people who have contributed capital to that particular company. Another implication of companies is that even if the natural person or the person, the human being who has contributed capital to that company ceases to exist, that is, he dies, that particular company will not cease to exist. It will continue to operate, and whatever ratio of ownership or proportion of ownership was there of this particular person will be transferred to his heirs or will be liquidated, and the value will be transferred to his heirs. But the company will not cease to exist. Will that happen in the case of a sole proprietorship? No. A person who is running a business dies. That means that particular business activity ceases to exist unless and until some of his heirs comes up and takes up the business operation and takes it forward. But the ownership will not be the same. The ownership will have to be redistributed according to the rules of inheritance in Islam. So this particular legal entity concept is debated among the scholars of Islam, but that is not the point of discussion that we are holding today. But we should understand that legal entity concept is widespread and it is very, very prevalent during these days. So there is no it is not the purpose of our discussion to debate the legality or the acceptability of the concept of liability and continuing entity. But as many of us, and it is very common that we are part of partnerships or we are part of companies in our lifetime, it's not a particular thing that is rare, but it is a very common thing that should deal with the zakat liability of these companies, partnerships, corporations, and also the proprietorship business that we are running. So, what we should understand in this context is that first of all, we should assess the form of ownership. We should clearly relegate the ownership to distinctive persons, and there should be a mechanism to do that, and that would be the starting point of assessing zakat of business properly. And to leave you with this video, I would also like to state another very important legal maxim which we should always remember when we are dealing with zakat. Az-zakatu ibadatun mabniyatun ala al-milk wal mas'uliyah. Az-zakatu ibadatun mabniyatun ala al-milk wal mas'uliyah. That is, zakat is an act of worship built upon ownership and responsibility and all those sub categories of conditions and terms that come along with ownership and responsibility. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you up later with more videos on this particular subject.